I was the ghost guest at my own sister's wedding, seated behind a massive marble pillar because she was ashamed of me. To the wealthy Harrington family, I was just a rumor, a stain on their pristine reputation that needed to be hidden away. But when a mysterious stranger in a bespoke tuxedo sat beside me and took my hand, everything changed. My sister stopped smiling when he stood up to speak, and the entire room went silent as he revealed a secret that would turn this celebration into a war zone. My name is Jada, and at 29 years old, I have learned that blood is not always thicker than water. Sometimes it is just toxic sludge you have to wade through. Before I tell you how I brought a $1 billion empire to its knees from table 19, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever been the black sheep who was actually the wolf in sheep's clothing. The wind off the Chicago River was biting as I stepped out of the Uber. I had deliberately chosen a standard sedan instead of the luxury black car service I usually used. Today was about blending in, not standing out. The Langham Hotel loomed above me, a fortress of glass and steel reflecting the gray sky. As I walked toward the revolving brass doors, the doorman stepped directly in my path. He was a tall man with a stiff uniform and eyes that scanned me from my simple heels to my understated black dress. "Service entrance is around the back, miss," he said, his voice flat and dismissive. He did not even ask, he just assumed. I paused, feeling that familiar prickle of irritation. It was the same look I got when I walked into boardrooms before they realized I owned the company. "I am a guest," I said quietly, reaching into my clutch to pull out the heavy cream-colored envelope embossed with silver lettering. He glanced at the invitation and then back at me, his eyebrows raising in barely concealed surprise. "Oh, apologies. The wedding is on the second-floor ballroom." He stepped aside but did not hold the door. I walked into the lobby, the scent of expensive lilies and old money hitting me instantly. Crystal chandeliers the size of small cars hung from the ceiling, casting a warm golden glow over the guests who were already milling about. They were a sea of pastel silks and designer suits, a mixture of Chicago old money and the new social climbers my sister was desperate to impress. I took a deep breath, tightening my grip on my vintage clutch. Inside was not just a lipstick and phone, but the keys to a kingdom they could not even imagine. "Jada." The voice was sharp enough to cut glass. I turned to see my mother, Patricia, marching toward me. She was wearing a floor-length champagne gown that was perhaps a bit too bridal for the mother of the bride, but that was Patricia. She needed to shine even if it meant dimming everyone else. She stopped 2 feet away from me, her eyes narrowing as she scanned my outfit. "I did not think you would actually come," she hissed, keeping her voice low so the nearby guests would not hear. "I thought you said you could not afford the flight." I smiled tightly. "I managed to scrape a few pennies together, Mom. I would not miss Bianca's big day." Patricia let out a scoff that was more of a bark. "Well, try not to look so pathetic. That black dress makes you look like you are going to a funeral, not a wedding. And please tell me you did not come here to ask your sister for money. She is marrying into the Harrington family today, Jada. Do not embarrass us with your poverty." I bit the inside of my cheek, tasting copper. If only she knew that the dress I was wearing was a custom Tom Ford piece worth more than her entire outfit and the car she drove here. If only she knew that the poverty she despised was a lie I had maintained to protect myself from their greed. "I am just here to wish her happiness," I said, keeping my voice steady. Patricia rolled her eyes. "Just stay out of the way. The Harringtons are very particular people. They do not need to know that Bianca's sister is a failure." Before I could respond, a flurry of movement caught our attention. Bianca appeared, emerging from the bridal suite like a vision. She was breathtaking, I had to admit. Her Vera Wang gown was a cloud of tulle and lace fitted perfectly to her frame. Diamonds sparkled at her throat and ears, and her makeup was flawless. But as she floated toward us, the smile on her face did not reach her eyes. It never did. She looked at me not with the warmth of a sister, but with the critical eye of a stage director inspecting a prop. "You made it," she said, her tone flat. She did not offer a hug. Instead, she extended a hand to smooth a non-existent wrinkle on her skirt, ensuring I could not get too close to crush the fabric. "You look fine. A bit plain, but I suppose that is good. You won't distract anyone." I pulled a small envelope from my purse. "Congratulations, Bianca. I brought you a gift." She glanced at the envelope with disinterest, assuming it was a cheap card with a $20 bill inside. "Thanks. Just put it on the gift table in the back." "Listen, Jada. We had to make some last-minute adjustments to the seating chart." She snapped her fingers, and a wedding planner hurried over, handing her a clipboard. Bianca tapped a manicured fingernail on the paper. "The Harrington family is very large, and Liam parents invited some senators at the last minute. We ran out of space at the main tables. So I put you at table 19. She pointed toward the far corner of the ballroom. I followed her finger. Table 19 was not really a table. It was a small round setup squeezed into the shadows directly behind a massive structural pillar wrapped in white roses. From that angle, it would be impossible to see the head table, the dance floor, or anything happening on stage. It was the kind of seat you gave to the sound technicians or the backup photographers. "You want me to sit behind a pillar?" I asked, my voice calm but cold. Bianca shrugged, a smile playing on her lips that was pure malice. "It is for the aesthetic, Jada. The photographer wants clear sightlines for the main guests. You understand, right? You have always been the understanding one. Besides, it is better this way. You do not know anyone here, and frankly, you would not have anything in common with Liam's friends. They talk about investments and summer homes. You know things you do not understand." My mother Patricia chimed in, placing a hand on Bianca's shoulder. "Your sister is right, Jada. It is for the best. You can just enjoy the food and keep quiet. Do not make a scene." I looked at them both, the two women who were supposed to be my family. They looked at me with such absolute certainty that I was beneath them, that I was nothing more than an embarrassing footnote in their glorious story. I felt a familiar burning in my chest, but I pushed it down, replacing it with the icy resolve that had made me one of the most feared business brokers in the country. They wanted me in the shadows. Fine, I would sit in the shadows. But they forgot that the shadows are where the ghosts live, and I was about to haunt this wedding in ways they could never predict. "That is fine," I said, forcing a small, polite smile. "Table 19 is perfect." "Thank you, Bianca. You look beautiful." Bianca turned away immediately, dismissing me as she turned her beaming smile toward an approaching photographer. "Go find your seat," Jada Mom said, waving her hand as if shooing away a fly. "And try not to eat too much. The plates are expensive." I walked across the vast ballroom, my heels clicking on the marble floor. I could feel eyes on me, not of admiration, but of curiosity. Who was the woman in black walking alone toward the back? I reached table 19. It was exactly as bad as it looked. The pillar completely blocked the view of the wedding arch. I was isolated, hidden, erased. I pulled out the chair and sat down, placing my clutch on the table. From my vantage point, I was invisible, but I could hear everything. I could hear the clinking of crystal from the nearby VIP tables. I could hear the hushed gossip. And then I heard a voice from the table directly to my left. It was a woman with a sharp, aristocratic accent. It was Mrs. Harrington, Liam's mother. "It is a shame about the seating arrangements," she said, loud enough for me to hear, though she did not know I was there. "But honestly, it is a relief. Bianca seems sweet, but her family, well, they are a bit distinct, aren't they? I heard she has a sister who is quite the problem, unemployed, probably on welfare. We certainly did not want her mingling with the senator." I stiffened. Unemployed, welfare. So that was the story Bianca had spun. She had painted me as a charity case to make herself look like the benevolent saint who rose above her trashy family. I reached for the glass of water on my table, my knuckles turning white. I had a net worth that could buy this hotel twice over, yet here I was being pitied by a woman whose husband I knew for a fact was currently under investigation by the SEC. I was about to stand up. I was about to leave. I was about to walk out and let them have their perfect fake wedding. But then the empty chair next to me moved. "Is this seat taken?" The voice was deep, smooth, and carried an authority that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I looked up. Standing there was a man who looked like he had just walked out of a GQ cover shoot, but with an edge that suggested he was dangerous. He was wearing a tuxedo that fit him like a second skin, and on his wrist was a Patek Philippe watch that I recognized instantly because I had been the one to facilitate its auction last month in Geneva. I do not think so," I stammered, caught off guard. "I am pretty sure this is the outcast table." He chuckled a low, rumbly sound and sat down. He did not look at the pillar blocking our view. He looked directly at me, his eyes dark and intelligent. "Good. I prefer the outcasts. The view is better from here anyway because you see things others miss." He extended a hand. "I am Isaiah, and I have a feeling you and I are about to have a very interesting evening." I looked at his hand, then at his face. He was not just a guest. He was a predator in a room full of prey. And for the first time all day, I did not feel alone. I felt like I had just been handed a weapon. I shook his hand. "I am Jada." He smiled, and in that smile, I saw a reflection of my own secret fire. "Nice to meet you, Jada. Now just follow my lead and pretend you are my date. Trust me, you are going to want a front row seat for what happens next." Sitting behind a 3-foot-wide pillar of cold Italian marble offers a unique perspective on a wedding. While the rest of the guests in the Langham Ballroom were treated to a view of the sunset over the Chicago River and the sparkling crystal archway where my sister was about to say her vows, I was staring at white stone. It was a physical manifestation of my place in this family, present but obstructed, useful but unseen. I smoothed the napkin over my lap, my fingers tracing the embroidered H for Harrington. The irony was almost suffocating. I had paid for these napkins. I had paid for the flower arrangements that I could smell but not see. I had quietly transferred the funds to my mother's account when she called me crying about the budget overruns last month. Yet here I was, hidden away like a dirty secret while they celebrated with my money. To my left, I could see the servers moving back and forth from the kitchen. They glanced at me with confusion, wondering why a woman dressed in a bespoke Tom Ford gown was sitting at the vendor table next to the soundboard operator who was currently eating a sandwich. I pulled out my phone, checking my encrypted email server. My team at Sterling Ventures was closing a massive acquisition in Tokyo. I was one of the most powerful financial architects in the city, yet in this room, I was reduced to nothing more than Bianca's embarrassing older sister. The isolation was not just physical, it was a heavy blanket of shame that they had successfully thrown over me. I took a sip of the lukewarm water in front of me, trying to swallow the lump in my throat. I told myself I stayed for closure. I told myself I stayed because despite everything, she was my little sister. But as the murmurs from the VIP table just beyond the pillar grew louder, I realized I was staying for something else entirely. I was waiting for the other shoe to drop. The acoustics in the ballroom were strange. The pillar blocked my view, but it seemed to funnel the sound from the head table directly to my ears. I could hear the clinking of expensive silverware and the polite laughter of the Harrington family. They were the kind of people who laughed without opening their mouths too wide, terrified of showing too much emotion. Then I heard a voice that made my blood run cold. It was Eleanor Harrington, the mother of the groom. Her voice was sharp and nasal, carrying the distinct arrogance of a woman who has never had to work for anything in her life. "It really is a blessing that Bianca has such a small family," Eleanor said, her voice cutting through the ambient jazz music. "I was terrified we would have to deal with that sister of hers. What is her name again?" "Jada." My hand froze around my water glass. I leaned in slightly, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Yes," Jada Liam replied, his voice sounding bored. "Bianca said she could not make it. Something about travel restrictions. Travel restrictions, Eleanor scoffed. Is that what we are calling parole these days? I felt the air leave my lungs. Parole. Oh, stop it. Eleanor, a male voice presumably. Liam's father chuckled darkly. You cannot blame the girl for her genetics. I heard she served 3 years for check fraud and embezzlement. It is a miracle Bianca turned out so well considering she comes from the same stock. We really dodged a bullet not having that ex-con here today. Imagine the headlines if Senator Miller saw us breaking bread with a felon. My vision blurred. The white marble in front of me seemed to turn red. Fraud. Embezzlement. Prison. That was the story Bianca had told them. To explain my absence from her life, to explain why she never invited me to engagement parties, to explain why I lived in the shadows, she had turned me into a criminal. She had not just hidden me, she had assassinated my character. I thought back to the nights I stayed up late working to pay for Bianca's tuition, the times I bailed her out when she maxed out her credit cards. I had built a fortress of lies to protect her dignity, and she had used the bricks to build a prison for my reputation. I gripped the edge of the table so hard my knuckles turned white. I wanted to stand up. I wanted to walk around that pillar and scream the truth until the chandeliers shook. I wanted to pull up my bank accounts and show them that their precious Harrington empire was drowning in debt that I owned. But I could not move. The betrayal was so deep it paralyzed me. I was not just the black sheep, I was the villain in a story I did not even know was being written. Just as I was about to lose my composure, I heard the scrape of a chair against the floor. A shadow fell over my table. I quickly wiped the corner of my eye, terrified that one of the Harringtons had seen me. But when I looked up, it was not a Harrington. It was the man from the lobby. Isaiah. He pulled out the empty chair next to me and sat down with a fluid grace that seemed out of place in the cramped corner. He did not ask for permission. He just settled in, adjusting his silk cufflinks and placing a glass of amber liquid on the table. He looked expensive. Not flashy like the Harringtons, but deeply quietly wealthy. The kind of wealth that does not need to shout because it commands silence. You are at the wrong table, I said, my voice trembling slightly with suppressed rage. The VIP section is around the pillar. You do not want to be seen here. Isaiah took a slow sip of his drink, his eyes fixed on the blank stone surface in front of us. He did not look at me immediately. He seemed to be listening to the same conversation I had just heard. Actually, I think this is exactly where I want to be, he said, his voice a low baritone that vibrated through the table. The air is cleaner back here, less performative. I stared at him. He was crazy. Or lost. Please leave, I whispered. I am not in the mood for company, especially not someone who looks like he owns half the city. Isaiah finally turned to look at me. His eyes were dark and intense, scanning my face with a precision that made me feel exposed. He saw the anger. He saw the hurt. And he saw the power I was trying so hard to suppress. You heard them, didn't you? He asked quietly, tilting his head toward the Harrington table. The check fraud. The embezzlement. Quite a creative resume for a woman who runs one of the most successful venture capital firms in Chicago. My breath hitched. How do you know who I am? Isaiah smiled, but it was not a happy smile. It was a shark-like grin, sharp and knowing. I make it my business to know the players, Jada. And you are the most interesting player in this room. You are the only one here who actually generated the wealth everyone else is pretending to have. He leaned in closer, his cologne smelling of cedar and rain. Listen to me. You can sit here and let them write your story. You can let them call you a criminal and a failure. Or you can sit with me and watch the house of cards fall. I looked at him, searching for a trap. But all I saw was a mirror of my own disdain for the charade happening around us. Who are you? I asked again. He ignored the question. Instead, he gestured with his glass toward the hidden bride and groom. Let us make a wager. I bet $10,000 that the groom sweating through his suit right now does not make it through the speeches without asking his father for money. And I bet double that the bride has no idea her new husband is functionally bankrupt. I blinked. You know about the Harrington finances? I know everything, Isaiah said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. And I know that this pillar is the best seat in the house because from here you can see the strings on the puppets. He extended his hand across the small table, palm up. Stay. Pretend you are with me. Let them wonder who the hell I am and why I am sitting with the felon's sister. Let us give them something real to gossip about. I looked at his hand. It was steady, strong. For the first time all day, I felt a flicker of amusement cut through the rage. Bianca wanted me hidden. She wanted me to be a ghost. But ghosts are terrifying because you cannot control them. And sitting next to this dangerous stranger, I realized I was done being the victim. I reached out and took his hand. It was warm. Make it 20,000, I said, my voice steadying. And you are on. Isaiah's grin widened. Deal. Now sit up straight, Jada. The show is about to start and I promised you a front row seat to the apocalypse. I stared at the man sitting next to me, trying to reconcile the conflicting signals. He was sitting at the outcast table behind a pillar at a wedding where the groom was sweating through a rented tuxedo, yet everything about this stranger screamed power. My eyes were drawn to his wrist as he adjusted his cuff. It was a Patek Philippe reference 1518 in stainless steel. I stopped breathing for a second. I knew that watch. I knew it because I had tried to bid on one for a client in Hong Kong last year, and we dropped out when the price hit $11 million. There were only 4 of them in the world. A man wearing the GDP of a small country on his wrist did not end up at table 19 by accident. He sat there with a relaxed confidence that was almost insulting to the nervous energy filling the room. He took a sip of his whiskey, and I watched the way his eyes scanned the crowd, not with curiosity, but with the boredom of a predator watching sheep graze. "Who are you?" I asked again, my voice barely a whisper. "You are not a friend of the bride, and you are definitely not a friend of the groom." Isaiah turned to me, and the corner of his mouth lifted in a smirk that made my stomach flip. "Let us just say I am an interested observer. I have a vested interest in the merger happening today." Merger. That was an interesting word choice for a wedding. Most people said union or marriage, only business people said merger. Before I could press him further, a shadow fell over our table. I looked up to see my mother Patricia standing there, her face twisted in a mixture of confusion and outrage. She had been on her way to the bathroom but had stopped dead in her tracks when she saw me talking to a man. Not just any man, but a man who looked like he had stepped out of a Bond movie. "Jada," she hissed, ignoring Isaiah completely. "What do you think you are doing? I told you to stay invisible. Who is this? Did you hire someone to sit with you so you would not look so pathetic?" I felt the familiar heat of shame rising in my cheeks. Even now at 29 years old, she could make me feel like a naughty child. "Mom, please not now," I said, keeping my voice low. "Do not, Mom, me," she snapped, her voice rising. "I know you, Jada. You are trying to upstage Bianca. You dragged some poor escort in here to make yourself look important. Well, it is not working. You look ridiculous. Tell him to leave before security drags him out." I opened my mouth to defend myself to tell her she was wrong, but Isaiah beat me to it. He did not stand up. He did not raise his voice. He simply turned his head and looked at my mother. It was a look of such absolute cold indifference that it was terrifying. It was the way a lion looks at a buzzing fly before swatting it. "Madam, I suggest you lower your voice," Isaiah said. His tone was polite, but there was steel underneath it. "Unless you want the senator at table 1 to hear you abusing your daughter. And as for my presence here, I assure you security is not going to remove me. In fact, if anyone is going to be removed, it will be the people who think they can scream at guests." My mother froze. She looked at Isaiah, really looked at him for the first time. She saw the cut of his tuxedo, the watch on his wrist, and the dangerous glint in his eyes. Her survival instinct kicked in. She realized she was not talking to a hired escort. She was talking to someone who could crush her social standing with a phone call. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish, but no sound came out. She smoothed her dress, took a nervous step back, and scurried away toward the restrooms without another word. I let out a breath I did not know I was holding. I had never seen anyone silence Patricia that fast. Usually she was a steamroller flattening anyone in her path. "You have a way with words," I said, turning back to Isaiah. He swirled the ice in his glass. "Bullies are all the same, Jada. They only attack when they think there are no consequences. Your mother has never met a consequence she could not manipulate until today." He set his glass down and turned his chair so he was facing me fully. "Listen, Jada, we do not have much time before the first dance starts. I have a proposition for you." I raised an eyebrow. "I am listening." "Tonight is going to be a bloodbath," Isaiah said calmly. "By the time the cake is cut, the Harrington family name is going to be worth less than the napkin on your lap. I am going to expose them for exactly what they are. Frauds, liars, thieves." My heart started to race. "Why? Why do you care?" "Because they stole something from me a long time ago," he said, his eyes darkening. "And I always collect my debts. But here is the thing. I can do it alone and it will be satisfying. Or I can do it with you and it will be legendary." He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a seductive whisper. "They put you behind a pillar. They told you to be invisible. They treated you like garbage because they think you are weak. Show them they are wrong. Be my date tonight. Walk out there with me not as Jada the outcast sister, but as Jada the woman on the arm of the most powerful man in the room. Let them see you. Let them fear you." I looked at him. I looked at the hand he was offering me. It was crazy. I did not know him. For all I knew, he was a criminal mastermind. But then I looked past him at the sliver of the ballroom I could see. I saw Bianca laughing with her friends, probably making jokes about me. I saw the Harringtons preening like peacocks. I saw a room full of people who had judged me without knowing me. I had spent my whole life trying to be good, trying to be helpful, trying to earn their love. And what had it gotten me? A seat behind a pillar. Maybe it was time to stop being good and start being formidable. "What do I have to do?" I asked. Isaiah smiled, and this time it reached his eyes. "Just follow my lead, laugh at my jokes, and when the music starts, do not let go of my hand." I took a deep breath. "Okay, I am in." Isaiah stood up and extended his hand to me. The movement was so graceful it drew the eye of the server nearby. I stood up, smoothing my Tom Ford dress. I felt a shift inside me. I was leaving the shadows. Isaiah tucked my hand into the crook of his arm. His muscles were hard beneath the expensive fabric. He led me away from the table, away from the safety of the pillar, and out into the open floor. "Ready to crash a wedding?" he asked softly. I looked up at him, and for the first time in years, I felt a genuine smile spread across my face. "More than ready," I said. We stepped onto the main floor. The chandeliers seemed to shine brighter. The noise of the crowd faded into the background. As we walked toward the center of the room, I felt heads turning. I felt the confusion rippling through the crowd. Who was that? Was that Jada? And who was she with? I held my head high. I was not the ghost anymore. I was the storm. And we were heading straight for the eye of the hurricane. The orchestra began to swell, playing the opening notes of a classic waltz that signaled the beginning of the reception festivities. Usually, this was the moment the bride and groom would take the floor for their first dance, surrounded by cooing relatives and flashing cameras. But Isaiah did not wait for permission. He did not wait for the MC to announce us. He simply placed his hand firmly on the small of my back and guided me onto the empty dance floor with the authority of a man who owned the building. For a split second, I hesitated. My old instincts, the ones trained by years of my mother's criticism, screamed at me to run back to the safety of the pillar. But then I looked at Isaiah. He was looking at me not with pity, but with expectation. He moved with a fluid grace, and as I stepped into his frame, my body remembered the ballroom lessons I had secretly taken in Vienna while closing the Austrian deal 3 years ago. I matched his stride perfectly. We did not just walk onto the floor, we claimed it. As we began to move, the entire room seemed to inhale at once. We were a striking contrast to the pastel-themed wedding. Isaiah in his sharp midnight tuxedo and me in my sleek black Tom Ford gown moving in perfect synchronization. I spun out and back in the skirt of my dress flaring dramatically. I caught glimpses of the guests' faces as we whirled past. Confusion, shock, awe. They were asking each other, who is that woman? Is that the sister? The one they said was in jail? She moves like a queen. I felt a surge of adrenaline that was more intoxicating than the expensive champagne. For the first time in my life, I was not shrinking to fit into the small box my family had built for me. I was expanding, taking up space, breathing the air at the center of the room. Isaiah looked down at me, a small, satisfied smile playing on his lips. "You see, Jada?" he murmured low enough that only I could hear. "You were never meant for the shadows. You shine too bright. We were stealing the show." The photographer who had been instructed to keep me out of the frame was now snapping photos of us, furiously captivated by the visual power of our movement. I saw my mother clutching her pearls, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. But the most satisfying reaction was yet to come. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement at the head table. Bianca, who had been preening for her bridesmaids, suddenly realized that no one was looking at her. Her eyes darted to the dance floor, and when they landed on me, her face contorted into a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. She was the bride. This was her day. And her failure of a sister was currently waltzing with a billionaire-looking man in the middle of her spotlight. Bianca stood up so abruptly her chair screeched against the marble floor, echoing through the ballroom. She did not care about the optics anymore. She marched onto the dance floor, her massive tulle skirt knocking over a flower arrangement as she came. She looked like a storm cloud in white lace. The music kept playing, but the tension in the room was thick enough to choke on. She stopped right in front of us, forcing Isaiah to bring us to a halt. "What do you think you are doing?" Bianca hissed, her voice trembling with fury. Her face was flushed, a blotchy red clashing with her perfect makeup. "Get off my dance floor. Go back to your seat behind the pillar where you belong. You are ruining my aesthetic. You are ruining everything." I stood my ground, my heart pounding but my face impassive. I was not the cowering big sister anymore. I smoothed my dress and looked her in the eye. "We were just dancing, Bianca." The floor was empty. "It was empty because I was about to dance," she shrieked, stomping her foot like a toddler. "Security! Where is security? Get this trash out of here." She pointed a manicured finger at my face. "And take your rented boyfriend with you. I told you, Jada, you are an embarrassment. Look at you trying to be someone you are not. Everyone here knows you are a charity case." The music faltered and died. The room went silent. Every eye was fixed on us. In the past, I would have cried. I would have apologized and run away. But today, I just felt a cold pity for her. Before I could respond, Isaiah stepped forward. He moved smoothly, placing himself between me and Bianca, shielding me from her venom. He towered over her, his presence sucking the air out of her lungs. He looked down at her with that same bored, detached expression he had used on our mother. "Mrs. Harrington," he said, his voice carrying clearly in the silent room, "I suggest you lower your voice. Stress is terrible for the complexion. In fact, I can already see a rather deep wrinkle forming right there on your forehead." Bianca's hand flew to her forehead in horror, her vanity instantly overriding her anger. "What? And as for ruining your aesthetic," Isaiah continued, his tone hardening, "your sister is the only thing giving this gaudy affair any class. You should be thanking her for elevating the tone of your wedding simply by existing." Bianca gasped, looking around for support. Liam! Liam, do something! This man is insulting me! Liam, who had been frozen at the head table, finally scrambled to his feet. He rushed over looking pale and sweaty. He was desperate to placate his new wife, but as he got closer, as he actually looked at the man standing next to me, his steps faltered. He slowed down, his eyes widening until they looked like they might pop out of his head. The color drained from his face completely, leaving him looking like a ghost. He stopped 3 feet away from us, his hands shaking. He looked from me to Isaiah and back again. The arrogance he had displayed earlier was gone, replaced by a sheer primal terror. Isaiah, he whispered, his voice cracking. Bianca looked at her husband, confused by his reaction. She expected him to throw a punch or call the police. She did not expect him to look like he was about to faint. Liam, what is wrong? She asked, grabbing his arm. Tell him to leave. Tell him who we are. Liam ignored her. He could not take his eyes off Isaiah. He swallowed hard. Isaiah, what are you doing here? I thought you were in Zurich. Isaiah smiled. It was a cold, predatory smile that sent shivers down my spine. Hello, Liam. It has been a long time. Zurich was boring. I decided to come home for the festivities. I would not miss my little brother's wedding for the world, even if my invitation seemed to have been lost in the mail. Brother. The word hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Bianca dropped Liam's arm. She looked at Isaiah, then at Liam, then back at Isaiah. Brother, she repeated, her voice barely a squeak. You told me your brother was a disowned loser. You told me he was nobody. Liam looked like he was going to be sick. Isaiah adjusted his cuffs, looking at Liam with cold amusement. I see you have been telling stories, Liam. Did you tell your lovely bride that the disowned loser is actually the one who owns the holding company that just bought your father's debt this morning? The silence that followed was deafening. I looked at Isaiah, my mouth slightly open. Even I had not known that part. The plot had just thickened, and the blood on the floor was about to be blue. The walk back to table 19 felt different this time. Before, we had been invisible shadows creeping along the edges of the ballroom, but now the silence that followed us was heavy with speculation. Every eye was glued to Isaiah and me, trying to decipher who we were and why the groom looked like he had seen a ghost. We sat down, and the heavy velvet curtain of isolation that usually surrounded the outcast table had been ripped away, replaced by a spotlight of curiosity. Liam was back at the head table, downing a glass of scotch with trembling hands, while Bianca sat stiffly beside him, her eyes darting between us and her confused guests. She was trying to regain control of the narrative, trying to pretend that the scene on the dance floor had not just shattered the perfect image she had cultivated. Dinner service began with a parade of waiters carrying silver trays high above their heads. The aroma of roasted garlic and butter filled the air as plates of Maine lobster thermidor and filet mignon were placed in front of the guests at the VIP tables. I could smell the richness of the sauce and hear the appreciative murmurs from Liam's family. My stomach rumbled, a traitorous reminder that I had not eaten since breakfast, because I had been too busy wiring the final payments for the venue security to ensure my ungrateful family was safe. A waiter approached our table, looking distinctly uncomfortable. He held a tray with 2 plates, but he hesitated before setting them down. He avoided looking at Isaiah, completely focusing his gaze on a spot somewhere above my left ear. Madam, the bride has given specific instructions regarding your meal, he mumbled, placing a plate in front of me with a soft clatter. I looked down. While everyone else was tucking into lobster tails glistening with butter, my plate contained a sad pile of wilted iceberg lettuce, 3 cherry tomatoes that looked like they had seen better days, and a single dry breadstick. There was no dressing. It was the kind of meal you give to a rabbit you are mad at. I looked up at the waiter. There must be a mistake. The invitation said the surf and turf was the standard option. The waiter shifted his weight nervously. The bride specified that you requested the vegetarian economy meal. She mentioned something about dietary restrictions and budget allocation. I felt the blood drain from my face. It was not about the food. It was never about the food. It was a calculated humiliation. Bianca wanted to remind me that even if I wore a designer dress and danced with a handsome stranger, I was still the poor relation in her eyes. I was still the one who deserved the scraps. Across the room, I saw Bianca watching me. She took a bite of her lobster and smirked a petty little victory that made my hands shake. Isaiah looked at my plate, then at his own, which was identical. He did not get angry. He did not shout. Instead, he let out a low, dark chuckle that sounded like thunder rolling in the distance. Economy meal. He repeated, testing the words on his tongue. I have not had a salad this depressing since I was in a holding cell in Monaco, and even they had the decency to provide olive oil. He pushed his plate away with a single finger, sliding it to the edge of the table where it teetered precariously. He did not look at the waiter. He raised his hand not high, just a subtle lift of 2 fingers. It was a gesture so small it should have been missed, but within seconds the double doors of the kitchen swung open. A man in an impeccable tailcoat hurried toward us. It was not a waiter. It was the general manager of the Langham Hotel, a man named Mr. Sterling, whom I had only ever seen in magazines. He was the kind of man who did not serve guests, he managed empires. Yet he was practically running across the ballroom, weaving through the tables with a look of sheer panic on his face. Mr. Sterling arrived at our table, and to the shock of the entire room, he bowed. It was not a polite nod. It was a deep, respectful bow of a man standing before royalty. Mr. Isaiah, he said breathlessly, wiping a bead of sweat from his brow. I had no idea you were in Chicago, sir. If I had known, I would have prepared the presidential suite personally. Please forgive the lapse in protocol. Isaiah looked at him calmly, ignoring the gasps rippling through the nearby tables. Hello, Sterling. It seems my invitation was overlooked. And it seems the kitchen is having a supply chain issue. He gestured lazily to the wilted lettuce. Unless this is the new avant-garde menu I am unaware of. Mr. Sterling looked at the salad and turned pale. He looked ready to fire the entire kitchen staff on the spot. This is unacceptable, sir. Completely unacceptable. I will have this removed immediately. Leave it, Isaiah said. Let it sit there as a reminder. But bring us the chef table menu, the tasting course. And Sterling, bring a bottle of the Chateau Margaux 1982, the one from my private reserve in the cellar. The 1982, sir. Mr. Sterling asked, his eyes widening. That bottle is worth $5,000. Isaiah smiled, a sharp, dangerous curve of his lips. It is a special occasion, Sterling. We are celebrating the revelation of truth. Open it and let it breathe. And bring 2 glasses. Crystal. Not the glass you are using for the rest of the reception. Right away, sir, immediately. Mr. Sterling snapped his fingers and 3 senior waiters rushed over, clearing the sad salads as if they were radioactive waste. Within minutes, our table was transformed. A crisp linen cloth was laid over the existing one. Silverware that looked heavier and more polished than what everyone else was using was set down. And then came the wine. Mr. Sterling presented the dusty bottle like a holy relic, peeling the foil with surgical precision. I watched the dark red liquid pour into the crystal glass and looked across the room. The atmosphere had shifted from curiosity to fear. The Harringtons were staring at the bottle of wine. They knew what it was. Liam's father was a collector, and I could see him doing the math in his head, realizing that the wine we were drinking cost more than the engagement ring on Bianca's finger. My mother leaned in close to Bianca, her voice carrying over the sudden hush of the room. Who is he? She hissed, her eyes fixed on Mr. Sterling pouring the wine. That is the general manager. He does not serve people, Bianca. He kicks people out. Why is he serving your sister like she is the Queen of England? And that wine, do you know how much that costs? Bianca looked pale, her grip on her fork tightening until her knuckles were white. She was trying to find a logical explanation, one that did not involve admitting she had made a colossal mistake. "It is a scam, Mom," she whispered loudly enough for her bridesmaids to hear. "He is probably a con artist. He probably stole a credit card or hacked the hotel system. Look at him. He is too flashy. Real rich people do not act like that. Just wait. When the bill comes and the card is declined, they will be escorted out in handcuffs. It will be hilarious." She took a large gulp of her wine, trying to look unbothered, but her eyes betrayed her. She was terrified. She watched as waiters brought out a tower of seafood for us oysters, topped with caviar truffle shavings, falling like snow onto Wagyu beef that made her lobster look like cafeteria food. Isaiah raised his glass to me, the crystal catching the light. To the economy meal, he said, his eyes dancing with amusement. I clinked my glass against his, taking a sip. The wine was exquisite, tasting of dark berries and victory. I looked over the rim of the glass at my sister. She was staring at me with a mixture of hatred and confusion. She had wanted me to feel small. She had wanted me to choke on dry lettuce while she feasted. But now she was the one choking on envy, watching as the sister she hid behind a pillar was being served the world on a silver platter. "Do you think they know yet?" I asked, nodding toward the head table. Isaiah sliced into his steak. "They suspect. Fear is creeping in. But they are still clinging to the lie because the truth is too expensive to afford. Just wait until the bill comes, Jada. That is when the real indigestion starts." The dinner service was winding down, and the tension at table 19 had shifted from a simmer to a boil. Isaiah was calmly dissecting his Wagyu beef while the rest of the room pretended not to watch us, but I needed a moment to breathe. The adrenaline of the dance and the satisfaction of the wine were starting to mix with a strange sense of unease. I excused myself and walked toward the ladies' lounge, my heels sinking into the plush carpeting of the hallway. The restroom at the Langham was less of a bathroom and more of a sanctuary of marble and gold leaf, designed to make you feel like a princess even while you were fixing your lipstick. I pushed open the heavy door, relieved to find the main vanity area empty. The silence was heavy and cooling against my flushed skin. I walked over to the row of sinks, turning on the tap just to hear the sound of running water. I looked at myself in the mirror. The woman staring back was not the Jada who had arrived terrified and small. She was sharper, harder, and infinitely more dangerous. I splashed some cold water on my wrists, trying to steady my racing heart. Just as I reached for a towel, the sound of a toilet flushing in the furthest stall broke the silence, followed by the click of a lock. I froze, not wanting to make small talk with a stranger. But the person inside did not come out. Instead, I heard the distinct beep of a phone call connecting, followed by a voice that made my stomach drop. It was Eleanor Harrington, Liam's mother. Pick up," she muttered impatiently. Then her tone shifted to a hushed urgency. "Charles, finally. I have been trying to reach you for an hour. No, do not worry about the reception. It is going smoothly enough aside from that dreadful sister causing a scene. But listen to me. We need to move the funds the second the marriage certificate is signed." I stood perfectly still, my hands hovering over the marble counter. I knew I should leave. I knew eavesdropping was wrong. But something in her voice kept me rooted to the spot. "Yes, I know the bank is calling," Eleanor hissed. "Tell them to wait until Monday. Once Bianca is officially a Harrington, her assets become marital property. Her father has promised a dowry that should cover the immediate interest payments on the yacht and the Hamptons house." I felt the blood drain from my face. Dowry. My parents did not have a dowry. They had debt and a mortgage that I paid for. Any money they had promised the Harringtons was money they were expecting to squeeze out of me later, or money that simply did not exist. "She is an idiot, Charles." Eleanor continued, letting out a cruel little laugh. "She thinks she is marrying into American royalty. She has no idea we are 3 weeks away from foreclosure. She is so desperate to be one of us, she did not even read the prenuptial agreement properly. We slipped in the clause about joint liability." Once she signs, she is on the hook for Liam's gambling debts too. I covered my mouth with my hand to stifle a gasp. This was not just a bad marriage, this was a financial hit job. They were using my sister as a human shield for their own incompetence. "We will keep her around for a year," Eleanor said casually, as if discussing a leased car. "It looks better for the press if the marriage lasts at least 12 months. Then Liam can file for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. We keep the assets she takes, half the debt, and we move on. It is a perfect plan. Just make sure the lawyers are ready on Monday." The call ended. I heard the rustle of silk as she adjusted her dress. I moved quickly, slipping into the nearest empty stall and locking it just seconds before Eleanor emerged. I peered through the crack in the door, watching as she washed her hands, humming a little tune to herself. She looked at herself in the mirror, satisfied, and preening, completely unaware that she had just confessed to a crime. She walked out, leaving a cloud of expensive perfume and moral rot in her wake. I waited until the door fully closed before I stumbled out of the stall. My legs felt weak. I hated Bianca. I hated how she treated me. I hated her selfishness. But she was my sister. She was the little girl I used to push on the swings. She was being led to the slaughter by a family of wolves who saw her only as a checkbook. "I have to tell her," I whispered to the empty room. "No matter what she has done, she does not deserve this." I took a deep breath, smoothing my dress, and turned to the door. I pulled it open and nearly collided with a wall of white tulle. Bianca was standing there, blocking the entrance. She looked flustered and angry, her eyes red-rimmed as if she had been crying or screaming. "Get out of my way, Jada," she snapped, pushing past me toward the mirror. "I need to fix my face before the cake cutting. God, this day is a disaster because of you." "Bianca, wait." I grabbed her arm, ignoring the way she flinched. "You need to listen to me. I just heard Eleanor on the phone." Bianca ripped her arm away, turning on me with bared teeth. "Do not say her name. You are not fit to say her name. What did you do, eavesdrop on her while she was peeing? You are pathetic. They are broke, Bianca," I said, my voice urgent and desperate. "The Harringtons, they are bankrupt. Eleanor just admitted it. They are only marrying you to get access to dad money, which we both know does not exist. They are planning to dump you in a year and leave you with Liam's gambling debts." Bianca stared at me. For a second, I thought she heard me. I thought I saw a flicker of doubt in her eyes, but then her face twisted into a mask of pure hatred. "You are such a liar," she screamed. "You are just jealous. You have always been jealous. You cannot stand that I am marrying a rich, handsome man while you are alone with your rented boyfriend. Bankrupt. Are you crazy? They own half of Chicago. They own debt, Bianca. Please look at the papers you signed. Look at the prenup. Shut up." The slap came out of nowhere. It was sharp and stinging, catching me right across the cheekbone. My head snapped to the side. The sound echoed off the marble tiles like a gunshot. I stood there, stunned, my hand flying to my face. The physical pain was nothing compared to the shock. I looked at Bianca. She was breathing hard, her chest heaving. There was no regret in her eyes, only triumph. "Do not you ever try to ruin my happiness again," she hissed, leaning into my face. "This is my life. I am a Harrington now, and you are nothing. Stay away from me. Stay away from Liam. And take your fake billionaire and get out of my wedding." I looked at her, really looked at her. I saw the fear behind the anger. I saw the desperation, but mostly I saw a stranger. I realized then that you cannot save someone who is determined to drown. I had tried. I had protected her for 29 years. But that slap broke the final thread of obligation that bound me to her. I slowly lowered my hand from my cheek. The stinging was fading, replaced by a cold clarity. The sister I loved was gone. All that was left was this bitter, delusional woman standing in a bathroom clinging to a lie. "Okay, Bianca," I said softly, my voice devoid of emotion. "I won't say another word. You want to be a Harrington so bad. Then be a Harrington." I stepped around her, moving toward the door. I did not look back. Good luck, I said, as I pushed the door open. You are going to need it. I walked out into the hallway, leaving her alone with her reflection. The warning died in my throat. I had done my duty. Now it was time to let gravity take over. I walked back toward the ballroom where Isaiah was waiting. The game had changed. I was not playing defense anymore. It was time to go on the offense. The ballroom lights dimmed, and a spotlight swept across the room, landing on the center stage where Bianca stood. She looked every inch the fairy tale princess in her couture gown, but I knew the rot beneath the silk. She tapped the microphone twice, a sharp feedback whine cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. Silence fell instantly. Bianca took a deep, shuddering breath, her hands trembling visibly around the mic stand. It was a masterclass in performance art. She looked fragile, brave, and utterly selfless. I watched from table 19, my hand resting on the cool linen tablecloth, waiting for the knife to twist. "Thank you all for being here," she began, her voice wobbling with practiced emotion. "Today is the happiest day of my life, not just because I am marrying Liam, but because I am surrounded by people who understand the value of family." She paused, wiping a tear from her perfectly lashed eye. "Growing up was not easy for us. My parents worked so hard, but we had our burdens. And the heaviest burden was one I carried silently for years." She looked down at her feet, then slowly lifted her head to scan the room. Everyone was leaning in, captivated by her vulnerability. "Many of you have asked about my sister Jada," she continued, her voice dropping to a whisper that the microphone amplified into a confession. "You have asked why she is sitting in the back, why she is not my maid of honor. The truth is painful, but I promised Liam I would start our marriage with honesty." She took another breath, looking directly at the Harrington family table. "For the last 10 years, I have been more of a mother to Jada than a sister. While I was working 2 jobs to put myself through college, I was also paying for her rehab. I was bailing her out of trouble. I was the one answering the late-night calls when she was too intoxicated to find her way home. I tried so hard to save her from herself. I gave her money, I gave her chances, I gave her my heart. But addiction is a monster that eats everything in its path." A collective gasp rippled through the room. I sat perfectly still, my face a mask of stone. Rehab, intoxication. The lies were so audacious, so completely divorced from reality, that they were almost impressive. I had never touched a drug in my life. I had graduated top of my class while running a startup. I was the one who paid off her student loans. But the room did not know that. They only saw a weeping bride and a stoic woman in black sitting in the shadows. Bianca turned her gaze toward me. The spotlight followed, washing over table 19, blinding me momentarily. "Jada," she said, her voice thick with fake compassion. "I know you are angry that I did not let you sit with the family today, but I had to protect you. I had to protect us. I want you to know that no matter what you have stolen from me, no matter how many times you have lied, I still love you. You are my sister, and I pray that one day you will find the strength to get clean and be the person I know you can be." She let the silence hang heavy and suffocating. Guests were turning in their seats, looking at me with expressions of pure disgust. I saw Liam's mother shaking her head, clutching her husband's hand as if my mere presence might contaminate them. My own mother, Patricia, was nodding vigorously from the front row, wiping her eyes with a handkerchief, clearly proud of Bianca's bravery in exposing the family shame. Then Bianca's eyes shifted to Isaiah sitting beside me. Her expression hardened slightly, a flicker of malice cutting through the sorrow. And to the gentleman sitting with my sister, she added, her tone dripping with warning. "I do not know who you are or what lies she has told you to get you here, but please be careful. Jada has a history of preying on kind-hearted men. Do not let yourself become her next victim." I would hate to see another innocent person destroyed by her need for chaos. The room erupted in low murmurs of agreement. The judgment was palpable, a physical weight pressing down on us. I felt the heat of 100 glares burning into my skin. In their eyes, I was a monster, a leech, a destroyer of happiness. Bianca had successfully painted herself as the saint and me as the sinner, and she had done it on the biggest stage of her life. I gripped the stem of my wine glass, fighting the urge to shatter it against the wall. It was over. My reputation in this room was incinerated. There was no coming back from this. But then, I felt a hand cover mine. Isaiah. He was not looking at me with disgust. He was not pulling away. He was looking at Bianca with a terrifying calmness. He slowly picked up his heavy silver spoon and his crystal wine glass. Clink, clink, clink. The sound was sharp and dissonant, cutting through the murmurs like a gunshot. Isaiah stood up. He did not rush. He rose with the languid grace of a panther unfolding itself from a nap. The room went silent again, confused by the interruption. He held the wine glass in one hand and the spoon in the other, and he smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of a man who was about to burn the theater down with everyone inside. Lovely speech. He projected his voice booming without a microphone filling the cavernous space easily. Truly moving. I almost cried myself. But there is just one small problem with your story, Bianca. He stepped away from the table, moving into the aisle. The spotlight swung wildly, trying to find him. You see, I ran a background check on Jada this morning, and it seems the only thing she is addicted to is bailing out her ungrateful family. He turned to face the head table, raising his glass in a mock toast. So I think it is time we heard a different version of events. Do not you agree, Liam? Or should I say brother? The silence in the ballroom was heavy enough to crush bones. Isaiah moved away from table 19, not with a hurry, but with the terrifying inevitability of a glacier. He walked down the center aisle, and every head turned to follow him. A large security guard with a thick neck and an earpiece stepped forward, clearly intending to intercept him before he reached the stage. The guard reached for Isaiah's arm, but before he could make contact, Mr. Sterling, the general manager, sprinted from the shadows. He did not run like a servant. He ran like a man trying to prevent a nuclear explosion. Sterling held up a hand sharply, signaling the guard to stand down. The guard looked confused, but he obeyed, stepping back into the shadows. Isaiah did not even flinch. He did not even look at the guard. He kept his eyes locked on the stage where Bianca was standing, frozen, her mouth slightly open, her fake tears drying on her cheeks. Isaiah ascended the stairs to the stage. The wood creaked slightly under his expensive dress shoes. He stopped next to Bianca, looming over her. Up close, the difference in their presence was staggering. Bianca looked like a child playing dress-up in her mother's clothes, while Isaiah looked like a king who had just returned to reclaim a stolen throne. He reached out and gently took the microphone from her trembling hand. She did not resist. She was too paralyzed by the sheer force of his proximity. Isaiah turned to face the room. He tapped the microphone once. The sound echoed through the cavernous hall, bouncing off the crystal chandeliers and the terrified faces of the guests. That was a touching speech, sister-in-law. He said, his voice smooth as velvet but cold as ice. Truly, I have not heard fiction that compelling since I read the quarterly earnings report for Harrington Industries. He chuckled, a low, dark sound that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. He turned his gaze from the confused crowd to the VIP table right in the front. To the table where Liam's parents Eleanor and Charles Harrington were sitting. They were no longer looking at Jada with disdain. They were staring at Isaiah with faces the color of ash. Eleanor was clutching her pearl necklace so hard I thought the string might snap. Charles looked like he was having a cardiac event. Hello, Mother. Hello, Father. The words dropped into the room like grenades. A collective gasp ripped through the audience. People turned to each other, eyes wide, whispering frantically. Mother. Father. Did he just say mother? Isaiah walked to the edge of the stage, looking down at his parents with a mixture of pity and contempt. It has been a long time, hasn't it? 10 years, I believe. 10 years since you threw me out of the house with nothing but the clothes on my back. 10 years since you told me I was a disgrace to the family name because I refused to take part in your Ponzi scheme of a business. He paused, letting the accusation sink in. You told everyone I was a drug addict. You told everyone I was mentally unstable. You scrubbed my name from the family trust and replaced me with Liam because Liam was obedient. Liam was willing to smile and shake hands and pretend that the Harrington empire was not built on a foundation of sand. He turned to look at Liam, who was still sitting at the head table, his head in his hands. And look where that obedience got you, little brother. Bianca finally found her voice. She grabbed Isaiah's arm, her fingernails digging into his tuxedo jacket. What are you talking about? Who are you? Liam said his brother was a bum. He said you were dead to them. Isaiah looked at her hand on his arm until she let go. I am dead to them, Bianca. But unfortunately for them, ghosts have a nasty habit of haunting the living, especially when there is money involved. He turned back to the crowd, his voice growing stronger, filling every corner of the room. My name is Isaiah Harrington. I am the eldest son of Charles and Eleanor, and I am the reason you are all drinking vintage wine tonight instead of tap water. You see, while my family was busy spending money, they did not have to keep up appearances. I was busy building something real. I started my own firm. I invested in technology and infrastructure in the very debt that my family was accumulating. He reached into his inner pocket and pulled out a folded document. He snapped it open, the paper crisp and white under the stage lights. You called my companion Jada a charity case. You mocked her for being poor. But let us look at the ledger, shall we? This morning at 9 o'clock, Harrington Industries officially defaulted on its primary loans. The banks were ready to seize everything. The house in the Hamptons, the yacht, this very wedding reception. He walked over to his father and dropped the document onto the table in front of him. It landed with a heavy thud amidst the fine china. But I bought the debt. I bought all of it. Every credit line, every mortgage, every outstanding loan. He looked around the room, his eyes blazing. Harrington Industries belongs to me. The house you sleep in belongs to me. The car you drove here in belongs to me. He turned back to Bianca, who was trembling so violently she looked like she might collapse. So when you stand there and call Jada a leech, when you lie about her character to hide your own insecurity, you are not just insulting my date. You are insulting the only other person in this room who actually understands what it means to earn a living. You married Liam for his money, Bianca. But here is the tragic irony. Liam has no money. His parents have no money. They are destitute. They are living on my charity. And as of this moment, I am reconsidering my generosity. The room was absolutely silent. Not a fork scraped a plate. Not a glass clinked. The revelation was total and devastating. The Harringtons, the golden family of Chicago, were frauds, and the man they had discarded was their new master. Isaiah looked at me across the room. His expression softened just a fraction. Jada, come here. I stood up. My legs felt shaky, but my head was high. I walked past the stunned guests, past the waiters who were staring with their mouths open, past my mother who looked like she had been struck by lightning. I walked to the stage and climbed the stairs. Isaiah took my hand. He looked at the crowd one last time. This wedding is a sham. The wealth is a sham. The only real thing in this room is the woman standing next to me. And we have seen enough. He dropped the microphone. It hit the floor with a deafening thud, signaling the end of the Harrington era and the beginning of ours. The silence that Isaiah had commanded moments ago shattered into a million pieces of chaotic noise. Charles Harrington was the first to break. He slammed his hand onto the table, causing the silverware to jump and clatter against the fine china. His face turned a dangerous shade of purple that clashed horribly with the expensive floral arrangements. You ungrateful wretch! He screamed, his voice shaking with a mixture of rage and humiliation. How dare you come here and spew these lies? I disowned you for a reason. You are nothing. You are a parasite. You think you can walk into my son's wedding and claim you own my company. I will have you arrested for fraud. I will sue you until you are begging on the street. Eleanor was right beside him, clutching her chest as if she were about to faint, but her eyes were venomous. Security! she shrieked, looking around frantically for the guards who were still standing in the shadows, unsure of what to do. Why is nobody moving? Get him out of here. He is mentally unstable. He is dangerous. Bianca, terrified that her perfect day was dissolving into a nightmare, grabbed the microphone stand as if it were a weapon. Her face was streaked with tears, but they were no longer the practiced tears of a victim. They were the hot, angry tears of a spoiled child being told no for the first time. "Security, where are you?" she yelled, her voice cracking. "Get him out! Throw him out on the street! He is ruining my wedding! He is lying! He is just jealous because Liam is the chosen one!" The room was in an uproar. Guests were standing up, craning their necks, whispering and pointing. The scene was pure chaos, a train wreck that nobody could look away from. But through it all, Isaiah stood on the stage perfectly calm. He watched his parents scream. He watched Bianca unravel. He looked like a scientist observing lab rats in a maze. He did not raise his voice to match theirs. He simply waited. He waited until the screaming began to die down, until the realization that the security guards were not moving began to sink in. Mr. Sterling, the general manager, was standing by the stage, arms crossed, staring at the Harringtons with a look of cold, professional detachment. He was not taking orders from them anymore. Isaiah raised the microphone again. His voice was low, but it cut through the lingering noise like a knife. "You can scream all you want, Mother," he said. "You can threaten me, Father. And Bianca, you can call for security until your voice gives out. But there is a fundamental rule of business that you seem to have forgotten. Possession is 9/10 of the law. And right now, I possess the deed to this building, the title to your home, and the controlling interest in your company." Charles sputtered, his hands shaking. "You are lying. Sterling Ventures bought the debt. I saw the paperwork. Sterling Ventures is a ghost company. Nobody knows who runs it." Isaiah smiled, and for the first time he looked toward table 19. He looked directly at me. "You are right, Father. Sterling Ventures is a ghost company. It specializes in distressed assets and hostile takeovers. It is run by a broker so efficient and so secretive that Wall Street calls her the ghost broker. She finds value where others see trash. She buys debt that others are too scared to touch." He pointed a long finger toward the back of the room. The spotlight swung again, cutting through the darkness and landing squarely on me. "You can try to throw me out," Isaiah continued, his voice ringing with triumph. "But I advise against it. Because while I own the assets, I do not own the debt. The person who holds the power to bankrupt you right now, this very second, is not me." He paused, letting the tension build until it was unbearable. "Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce you to the owner and CEO of Sterling Ventures. The woman who currently holds 80% of the Harrington family debt. The woman you shoved behind a pillar. Jada." The name hung in the air. For a moment, nobody moved. They looked at the pillar, they looked at the empty wine glasses on table 19, and then they looked at me. I saw the blood drain from Bianca's face. I saw my mother Patricia clutch the back of a chair to keep from falling over. I saw Liam look from Isaiah to me, his mouth hanging open in sheer disbelief. Jada, Bianca whispered the microphone, picking up her trembling voice. "That is impossible. She is broke. She is a loser. She is Jada." I stood up. I did not stand up quickly. I did not rush. I stood up with the slow, deliberate movement of a woman who has nothing left to hide. I smoothed the front of my black Tom Ford dress. I picked up my clutch from the table. I looked at the waiter who had brought me the salad and gave him a small nod. He looked terrified. I walked out from behind the pillar. I did not walk with my head down. I did not hunch my shoulders. I walked with the stride of a CEO entering a boardroom to fire everyone. The sound of my heels on the marble floor was a steady, rhythmic beat in the silent room. Click, click, click. I walked past the tables where people had sneered at me. I walked past the women who had whispered about my prison record. I walked past the men who had looked at me with pity. I kept my eyes locked on the stage, on the family that had tried to erase me. I reached the bottom of the stairs and looked up at them. Up close, they looked small. They looked pathetic. I opened my clutch. My fingers brushed against the cool metal of my phone and the heavy paper of the documents inside. I had brought them as a failsafe. I had known about the Harringtons' financial trouble for months. I had bought the debt quietly, intending to use it as leverage if they ever tried to hurt Bianca. I had planned to give it to them as a wedding gift, a clean slate if they had just treated me with a shred of decency, but they had chosen violence. So I would choose justice. I pulled out the folded stack of legal documents. They were thick bound with a blue cover. I climbed the stairs, my movements precise. I stood next to Isaiah. He looked down at me with pride. I turned to face the Harringtons. "Hello, Charles. Hello, Eleanor." My voice was not amplified by a microphone, but in the silence it carried perfectly. "I believe we have some business to discuss." "You, my mother," Patricia shrieked from the front row, finding her voice. "You lied to us. You said you were struggling. You let us think you were poor." I looked down at her. "No, mother. I never said I was poor. You assumed I was poor because I did not flash money around like a toy. You assumed I was struggling because I did not buy your affection with gifts. I built a fortune while you were busy building a facade." I turned back to Charles Harrington. He was staring at the documents in my hand, recognizing the blue binder of Sterling Ventures. "You are the ghost broker," he whispered, his voice filled with horror. "I am," I said coldly. "And these are the foreclosure notices for your estate in Lake Forest, your penthouse in the city, and the commercial properties downtown. Technically, as of 5 o'clock this evening, I own the chair you are sitting on." Bianca rushed forward, grabbing my arm. "Jada, stop it. This is a joke, right? This is some sick, twisted joke. You cannot own their debt. You are my sister. You are supposed to help me." I looked at her hand on my arm. The same hand that had slapped me in the bathroom. The same hand that had pointed me to the back of the room. "I tried to help you, Bianca," I said, my voice devoid of warmth. "I paid your tuition. I paid your rent. I tried to warn you in the bathroom that these people were using you. But you slapped me. You told me I was jealous." I pulled my arm away from her grasp. "I am not jealous, Bianca. I am the landlord. And your lease is up." Bianca threw her head back and laughed. It was a shrill, manic sound that bounced off the high ceilings of the ballroom like shattered glass. She looked around the room, seeking eye contact with anyone who would join in her mockery, trying to turn the tide of the room back in her favor through sheer force of denial. "You almost had them." "Jada," she gasped, wiping tears of mirth from her eyes. "For a second there, you actually sounded convincing. You own the debt. You own the building. It is hilarious. Truly, you should be a screenwriter instead of a professional leech." She stepped to the edge of the stage, gesturing down at me with supreme condescension. "Everyone, please do not listen to this woman. My sister has a very active imagination. The truth is, she is currently unemployed. My mother has to slide her $20 just so she can take the bus to job interviews that she never gets. She lives in a studio apartment the size of a closet that my father co-signed for, and now she stands here claiming to be a financial mogul. It is pathetic. It is delusional." My mother. Patricia nodded vigorously from the front row, her face regaining some of its color now that Bianca was fighting back. "She is right. Jada needs help. We have tried to support her, but she refuses to take her medication." I listened to them weave their narrative. It was a story they had told so many times that they had started to believe it themselves. They needed me to be the failure so Bianca could be the success. They needed me to be the burden so they could be the martyrs. I did not argue. I did not scream. I simply turned to Isaiah and gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Isaiah pulled his phone from his tuxedo pocket and tapped the screen once. Behind Bianca, the massive projection screen that had been displaying a slideshow of her and Liam posing on yachts and in vineyards suddenly flickered. The romantic music cut out, replaced by a low hum of static. The images of the happy couple vanished. In their place, a high-definition banking interface appeared. The room went silent again. Bianca turned around confused by the sudden change in lighting. She looked up at the screen. It was not a photo. It was a live feed of a bank statement. At the top of the screen in bold letters was the logo for Sterling Ventures, and right below it was the account holder name Jada Vance. But it was the transaction history that made the air leave the room. I walked closer to the stage, pointing at the screen. "You said Mom gives me bus money, Bianca. Let us look at the ledger." The screen scrolled down, controlled by Isaiah's phone. August 12th. A wire transfer of $15,000 to Vera Wang Bridal. I looked at the dress Bianca was wearing. "That is odd," I said, my voice calm and deadly. "I thought you said Liam bought that dress as a gift." "But here is the payment coming directly from my personal trust." The screen scrolled again. September 1st, $45,000 to University of Chicago bursar office. Bianca's final tuition payment, October 4th, $6,000 to Mercedes-Benz Financial. A lease payment for a white G-Wagon. Bianca stared at the screen, her mouth opening and closing. She looked at the car key sitting on the table in front of her. She looked at her dress. She looked at the date on the tuition payment. "This is fake," she whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. "This is Photoshop." "Is it?" I asked. "Check your phone, Bianca. Check the notification you got this morning for your honeymoon flight confirmation." Who paid for it? The screen showed one final transaction. $20,000 to Emirates Airlines. Booking reference Jada 123. I turned back to the crowd. For 5 years, I have silently funded this family's lifestyle. Every time my mother said Dad had a good month at the track, she was lying. Every time my father said his old investments finally paid off, he was lying. I looked at my father, Charles, who was now sitting with his head in his hands, unable to look at his favorite daughter. Tell her, Dad. Tell Bianca where the money actually came from. My father did not speak. He just shrank into his suit, looking smaller and older than I had ever seen him. My mother, Patricia, tried to intervene. "Jada, stop this. We are a family. We share resources. We do not share resources, Mother." I snapped, my voice cracking like a whip. "I provide resources. You consume them, and then you spit on the hand that feeds you." I walked up the stairs until I was standing face to face with Bianca. She looked terrifyingly young in that moment, stripped of her arrogance. She looked at the screen, then at our parents, then at me. The realization was washing over her in waves. The narrative of her life. The story of the golden child and the scapegoat was falling apart. She wasn't the princess because she was special. She was the princess because I had paid for the crown. Mom told me Dad won a settlement, Bianca said, her voice shaking. She said you were jealous because they used the money on me. She said you hated me because I was the one who deserved it. I looked at her with pity. They lied to you, Bianca. They knew I would never tell you because I wanted you to be happy. I wanted you to finish school without guilt. I wanted you to have the wedding I never had. So I let them take the credit. I let them tell you I was a failure while I worked 18-hour days to make sure your credit card did not get declined. I gestured to the room, to the flowers, to the food, to the very walls of the hotel. I paid for all of it. I am not the poor relation, Bianca. I am the bank, and the bank is closed. Bianca turned slowly to look at our mother. Patricia was weeping now, playing the victim card again, but it was not working. The truth was written in black and white on a 20-foot screen. "You made me treat her like trash," Bianca whispered. "You told me she was worthless. And all this time..." She looked down at her dress, the dress I had paid for. She looked at the guests who were now looking at her, not with admiration, but with the awkward pity reserved for someone who has just realized their entire life is a fraud. I stepped back, standing next to Isaiah. He put a hand on my shoulder, a solid weight, grounding me in the chaos I had unleashed. "So when you mock me for taking the bus," I said, my voice soft but final, "remember that I take the bus so you can drive a Mercedes, but do not worry about that anymore. I canceled the lease this morning. They are coming to tow it from the parking lot in about 10 minutes. Bianca let out a sob, a raw, ugly sound of total defeat. She slumped against the podium, her fairy tale ending dissolving into a nightmare of receipts and bank statements. The illusion was gone, and in its place was the cold, hard truth that the sister she despised was the only reason she was standing there at all. The atmosphere in the ballroom had shifted from a wedding reception to a hostage situation. The hostage was not a person, but the Harrington family legacy, and I was the one holding the gun. Charles Harrington slumped into his chair, his face a mask of absolute defeat. He looked at the legal documents in my hand, as if they were a death warrant, and in many ways they were. He knew exactly what was in the fine print of the loans he had taken out. He knew about the falsified asset declarations and the inflated collateral values. If I chose to foreclose immediately, if I chose to hand these files over to the district attorney instead of a bankruptcy court, Liam would not just be homeless, he would be facing federal fraud charges. The room was suffocatingly quiet, the air thick with the smell of expensive perfume and primal fear. Eleanor Harrington was gripping her husband's arm so tightly her knuckles were white. She looked at me, and for the first time I did not see arrogance. I saw a terrified mother realizing she could not bribe her way out of this one. Liam was standing by the head table sweating profusely. He looked like a trapped animal, his eyes darting between his angry father, his weeping bride, and the brother he had betrayed. I took a step forward, the sound of my heel on the stage echoing like a judge's gavel. I watched them squirm. I watched the realization sink in that their entire existence was hanging by a thread that I held between my fingers. I could crush them right now. I could snap my fingers and end it all. But destruction is easy. Control is far more satisfying. You have 3 options, Charles. I said, my voice calm and projecting clearly to the back of the room. Option 1 is immediate foreclosure. I seize the assets tonight. The locks on your doors are changed within the hour. The press gets wind of the fraud investigation by morning, and Liam trades his tuxedo for an orange jumpsuit. Eleanor let out a strangled sob, putting a hand over her mouth. Liam turned a shade of pale green, looking as if he might vomit on the wedding cake. Option 2. I continued, keeping my eyes locked on Charles. You fight me in court. You drag this out. But we both know you do not have the liquidity to hire a lawyer who can go up against Sterling Ventures. You will lose, and you will lose publicly. I paused, letting the silence stretch, letting them imagine the headlines. Or we go with option 3. Charles looked up, his eyes desperate and watery. What is option 3? He rasped, his voice barely audible. I looked at the blue folder in my hand. Then I looked at Bianca. She was slumped against the podium, looking small and broken, stripped of her illusions. She had been cruel to me, yes. She had been selfish. But she was being used as a financial life raft by a family of sharks, and I would not allow it. I will grant you a 6-month extension on the loans, I said. I will suspend the interest payments. That gives you 6 months to liquidate your assets quietly. You can sell the yacht. You can sell the summer house. You can downsize with dignity and pay back what you owe without the public humiliation of a foreclosure auction. Charles nodded frantically, hope flickering in his eyes. Yes. Yes, thank you, Jada. We will do that. We will sell everything. Just give us time. I held up a hand, stopping him. There are conditions, I said, my voice hardening. Anything, Charles said. Anything. Condition number 1 is that Liam issues a public apology to me right now. Into that microphone. I want him to admit that he and his family judged me while living on my money. Liam flinched, but he nodded quickly, desperate to save his own skin. And condition number 2, I said, turning my gaze to Bianca. This wedding is cancelled. Immediately. The room gasped. Bianca looked up, her eyes wide with shock. You cannot do that, she whispered. We are already married. We signed the papers. I looked at her coldly. Tear them up. Annul it. I do not care how you do it, but this merger is over. I am not going to finance a marriage built on fraud. And I am certainly not going to let you drag my sister's financial future down into the sewer with you, just to save your own reputation. I turned back to Liam. So that is the deal, Liam. You apologize to me, and you end this charade right now. Or I make the call, and the police are waiting for you in the lobby. You have 10 seconds to decide. I checked my watch, the diamonds catching the light. 1, 2, 3. Liam did not wait for me to get to 4. He did not look at his parents. He did not look at his brother. And most devastatingly, he did not look at Bianca. The self-preservation instinct kicked in with a speed that was almost impressive. He lunged for the microphone, snatching it from the stand with a desperate grip. "I am sorry," he blurted out, his voice booming through the speakers, too loud and distorted. "I am sorry, Jada. We were wrong. We treated you poorly. You are a generous woman, and we owe you everything. I apologize. My family apologizes. Please do not call the authorities." He was panting, sweating, shaking. It was pathetic, but it was public. Every person in that room heard the golden boy of Chicago beg for mercy from the woman he had mocked. "And the wedding?" I asked, crossing my arms. Liam turned to Bianca. She was standing there, tears streaming down her face, looking at him with a mixture of hope and terror. She was waiting for him to fight for her. She was waiting for him to say that he loved her more than money, more than his reputation. She was waiting for the fairy tale ending she had convinced herself she deserved. Liam looked at her with cold, dead eyes. The mask of the loving groom had fallen away completely, revealing the coward underneath. "It is over, Bianca," he said, his voice flat. "Liam, no," she sobbed, reaching for him. "We can fix this. We can work it out." "There is nothing to work out," he snapped, pulling away from her touch as if she were contagious. "You heard her. The deal is off. I cannot marry you." But why, she cried. "Because of money. Because of my sister. Because you have nothing," he shouted, losing his composure completely. "Look at you. You are a fraud, just like she said. You come from nothing. You have no dowry. You have no assets. I was marrying you to save my family, but now you are just a liability." The cruelty of his words hung in the air like toxic smoke. The guests were silent, watching the brutal dissection of a romance that had never been real. "Get away from me," Liam sneered, brushing off his tuxedo jacket where she had touched him. "Go back to your sister. Maybe she will pay for your cab ride home, because I am certainly not marrying a pauper." Bianca stood frozen on the stage. The man she had worshipped, the man she had humiliated her own sister to impress, had just discarded her like a piece of trash the moment it became convenient. She looked at him, and finally she saw him. She saw the weakness. She saw the greed. She saw that she had sold her soul for a man who did not even have a heart to give in return. I watched from the stairs, feeling no joy, only a grim satisfaction. I had not destroyed her marriage. I had just turned on the light so she could see the cockroaches. Liam turned back to me, his face eager and pathetic like a dog waiting for a treat. "I did it, Jada. I did what you asked. The wedding is off. We are done. Now please tell me the deal stands." I looked at him with pure disgust. "The deal stands, Liam. You have 6 months, but I suggest you start packing tonight. I have a feeling your new reality is going to be a lot smaller than this ballroom." I turned and walked down the stairs, leaving them in the wreckage of their own choices. The wedding was over. The reception was over. But for me, life was just beginning. Liam walked away from her without looking back, his stride long and purposeful, as if he could outrun the shame of the last 10 minutes. Bianca stood frozen for a heartbeat, her hands still reaching out into the empty air where his arm had been. Then gravity seemed to take hold of her. She did not fall gracefully like a heroine in a movie. She collapsed. Her knees hit the hard wood of the stage with a sickening thud, and she curled forward, her hands grasping at the floor. The pristine white tulle of her Vera Wang gown, which cost more than my first car, spilled around her in a chaotic heap, dragging through the dust and the scuff marks left by Liam's shoes. She let out a sound that was not quite a scream and not quite a sob. It was the guttural noise of an animal caught in a trap, realizing there is no escape. Liam, she wailed, crawling toward the edge of the stage. Please do not go. I can fix this. I will sign anything. I will do anything. Liam stopped at the bottom of the stairs. He turned not to look at her, but to check if the security guards were clearing a path for him. He saw her crawling toward him, tears streaming down her face, leaving black streaks of mascara across her cheeks. He looked at her with an expression of pure, unadulterated revulsion. It was the look one gives to something unpleasant stuck to the bottom of a shoe. Do not touch me! He spat out, his voice carrying through the silent ballroom. You are pathetic. You and your lying family have ruined my life. Stay away from me. He turned and pushed past a waiter storming toward the exit. Bianca lunged forward, trying to grab the hem of his trousers, but she missed. She fell flat on her stomach, her beautiful dress catching on a nail in the stage floor. We heard the sharp ripping sound of expensive fabric tearing. A large jagged hole appeared in the train of her dress, revealing the dirty floor beneath. She lay there in the ruins of her vanity, sobbing into the wood. Her perfect hair was a mess, her makeup was destroyed, and her dignity was gone. She was no longer the princess of the ball. She was just a desperate woman in a torn dress crying over a man who had never loved her. I watched from the side, my arms crossed. I felt a flicker of pity, but I crushed it instantly. I remembered the years of torment. I remembered the way she had mocked me when I could not afford lunch because I had sent my paycheck to pay her rent. I remembered the slap in the bathroom. This was not cruelty. This was consequences. Bianca pushed herself up to her knees. She looked around the room, her eyes wild and searching. She needed a savior. She needed someone to tell her that she was still the golden child, that she was still special. Her eyes landed on the front row. Mom, she screamed, her voice cracking. Mom, do something. Talk to him. Tell him to come back. My mother. Patricia was standing by her table. She was trembling, but she did not move toward the stage. She did not rush to comfort her sobbing daughter. She stood rooted to the spot, her eyes wide with shock. For 30 years, Patricia had invested everything in Bianca. She had pampered her, protected her, and prioritized her over me at every turn. Bianca was her retirement plan. Bianca was her ticket to the high society life she felt she deserved. She had bet the farm on the pretty face and the charm, believing that Bianca would marry a king. But now the king was revealed to be a pauper, and the castle was built on a foundation of debt. And standing next to the wreckage, holding the keys to the entire kingdom, was the daughter she had thrown away. Mom, Bianca pleaded, extending a shaking hand toward her. You said I was the princess. You said I deserved everything. Help me. Patricia looked at Bianca. She saw the torn dress. She saw the mascara running down her chin. She saw the desperation. And then slowly, mechanically, she turned her head. She looked at me. She looked at my Tom Ford dress. She looked at the diamonds on my wrist. She looked at the blue folder in my hand that contained the deed to her house and the power to destroy her life. I saw the gears turning in her mind. I saw the horrifying calculation. She realized she had backed the wrong horse. She had spent a lifetime kicking the goose that laid the golden eggs to feed the parasite. Patricia did not step forward to hug Bianca. She did not offer a word of comfort. She simply closed her eyes and turned her face away, unable to look at the failure she had created. Mom, Bianca whispered the word dying in her throat. The rejection was absolute. It was colder than Liam's. Liam was a stranger. Patricia was her mother. And in that moment, Bianca realized that her mother's love was just like Liam's, conditional, based on success and status. Without the wedding, without the money, Bianca was worthless to her. The room began to stir. The guests who had been paralyzed by the shock of the revelation were now waking up. The spell of the Harrington name was broken. They were no longer at the wedding of the year. They were at a crime scene of social suicide, and like onlookers at a car crash, they could not look away. But they did not want to stay. I heard the scrape of chairs being pushed back. People began to stand up. They did not line up to offer condolences. They did not wait for the cake. They grabbed their purses and their coats, eager to distance themselves from the stench of failure. But they did not just leave. That would have been too kind. I saw a phone go up in the air, then another, then a dozen. The soft glow of screens illuminated the dim ballroom. Guests were holding their phones high, recording the woman sobbing on the stage. I saw the familiar interface of Instagram Live and TikTok. They were broadcasting this. They were streaming the downfall of the Harrington-Bianca merger to the world. "Look at her," someone whispered near me, not bothering to keep their voice down. "I told you she was a fraud. Can you believe she tried to fake a dowry?" Another laughed. I heard the camera shutter sounds clicking rapidly. Click, click, click. Bianca looked up and saw the wall of phones. She saw her former friends, her bridesmaids, the people she had tried so hard to impress, all pointing their lenses at her misery. She was trending. She was going viral. But not as the beautiful bride. She was the laughingstock of Chicago. The woman who got dumped at the altar because she was broke. She covered her face with her hands, trying to hide, trying to shield herself from the digital onslaught. But there was nowhere to hide. The internet is forever, and her humiliation was being immortalized in 4K resolution. "Stop it," she screamed, her voice muffled by her hands. "Stop filming me. Go away." But nobody stopped. They just zoomed in. I turned to Isaiah. His face was impassive, but his eyes were hard. "We should go," I said. "The show is over." Isaiah nodded. He offered me his arm. We walked toward the exit, moving against the tide of fleeing guests. People parted for us like the Red Sea. They looked at me with fear and respect. They looked at the woman who had walked in the back door and was walking out as the owner of the building. As we reached the double doors, I looked back one last time. Bianca was curled in a ball on the stage, alone in the spotlight, surrounded by the empty tables and the judgmental gaze of camera lenses. My mother was sitting in her chair, staring blankly at a centerpiece. My father was pouring himself a drink from a leftover bottle, his hands shaking. It was a tragedy of their own making, and I felt the heavy burden of my anger finally lift off my shoulders. I did not need to punish them anymore. They were going to live with this moment for the rest of their lives. I pushed the heavy doors open and stepped out into the cool night air, leaving the heat and the noise behind. Silence never sounded so sweet. The night air outside the Langham Hotel was crisp and cool, a sharp contrast to the suffocating heat of the ballroom. I walked down the stone steps, my heels clicking a steady rhythm on the pavement. Beside me, Isaiah remained silent, his presence a comforting weight against the chaos I had just left behind. We were almost to the curb where a line of valets was waiting, when I heard the frantic clatter of footsteps behind us. I knew that sound. I knew the desperate, irregular cadence of someone running in heels they could not afford. I did not want to stop. Every instinct in my body told me to keep walking, to get into the car and disappear into the night. But the voice that called out my name was one that had commanded my attention for 29 years, and old habits are the hardest to break. "Jada, wait. Please wait." I stopped. I did not turn around immediately. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the city air, letting it steady my racing heart. I felt Isaiah tense beside me, ready to intervene, but I placed a hand on his arm. This was a battle I had to fight alone. I turned slowly. My mother, Patricia, was standing at the bottom of the stairs. She looked like a ruin of her former self. Her hair was disheveled, her expensive makeup was smeared, and she was gasping for breath. She looked at me, and then she looked at Isaiah, and then back to me. Her eyes were wide and frantic, searching my face for any sign of the daughter she used to manipulate. "Jada," she panted, taking a stumbling step toward me. "Baby, please. You cannot just leave like this. We need to talk." "There is nothing to talk about, Mother," I said, my voice flat. I think I made my position very clear inside. "No, you did not understand," Patricia pleaded, reaching out as if to touch me. but stopping short when she saw the cold look in my eyes. I did not know, Jada. I swear on my life I did not know about the fraud. It was your father. He lied to me too. He told me the business was doing well. He told me the money for the tuition in the house came from his investments. I was a victim too, Jada. I was just trying to keep the family together. She let out a sob, pressing a hand to her chest. You know I love you, right? You are my firstborn, my baby. I was hard on you because I wanted you to be strong. I wanted you to be independent, and look at you now. You are so successful. You are a genius just like I always knew you could be. Do not punish me for your father's mistakes. Do not abandon your mother because she was blind to the truth. I watched her performance with a strange sense of detachment. A year ago, a month ago, even an hour ago, this might have worked. I might have crumbled. I might have believed that her cruelty was just misguided love. But now I saw the strings. I saw the panic in her eyes not because she was losing a daughter, but because she was losing her ATM. She was not sorry she was broke. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, I saw her not as a giant who controlled my world, but as a small, pathetic woman clinging to a lie. Stop it, I said quietly. Patricia froze, her fake sob cutting off in her throat. Stop lying, Mother. You knew. You signed the tax returns. You saw the bank statements. I know you knew because I was the one who intercepted the foreclosure notices you threw in the trash 3 years ago. Patricia opened her mouth to argue, but I cut her off, my voice rising just enough to silence her. And do not insult my intelligence by telling me you love me. You do not love me. You love the way I make you look when I am successful, and you love the way I make you feel superior when you treat me like garbage. You love the control. You love having a punching bag that also pays the bills. I took a step closer to her, and she actually shrank back, fear replacing the fake sorrow in her eyes. You want to talk about independence? Fine, let us talk about it. For 5 years I have paid the mortgage on the house you live in. I have paid the lease on your car. I have paid for your country club membership. I have paid for everything while you sat there and told everyone I was a disappointment. Jada, please, Patricia whispered, looking around to see if anyone was watching. We can work this out. We are family. We are not family, I said, feeling the final thread of obligation snap. We are a business transaction that has gone bad, and I am closing the account. I reached into my clutch and pulled out a single business card. It was the card of my personal assistant. Here is the new reality, Mother. As of tomorrow morning, all automatic transfers to your accounts are canceled. The credit cards are frozen. The lease on the car is terminated. Patricia stared at the card in my hand as if it were a poisonous snake. You cannot do that. How will we live? Your father has no income. That is not my problem anymore, I said. But I am not completely heartless. You have a roof over your head tonight. The house in Lake Forest. She looked relieved for a split second. Yes. Yes, the house. We can sell the house. I let out a short, humorless laugh. No, you cannot sell the house, Mother. Because you do not own the house. I do. I bought the mortgage from the bank 6 months ago when Dad missed 3 payments in a row. The deed is in my name. Patricia's face turned the color of old ash. You own the house. I do. And I am giving you 7 days. 7 days for what she asked, her voice trembling. 7 days to pack your things and vacate the premises. I said, my tone as cold as the wind off the lake. I am putting the property on the market next Monday. Whatever equity is left after the debts are paid will be given to you. That should be enough for a small apartment and a fresh start. It is more than you deserve, and it is the last penny you will ever get from me. Patricia stood there stunned into silence. The magnitude of what was happening was finally sinking in. She was not just losing her lifestyle, she was losing her home. She was being evicted by the daughter she had spent a lifetime tormenting. You are evicting your own mother, She whispered the words, sounding foreign on her tongue. No, I said, turning away. I am evicting a squatter who has overstayed her welcome. I turned back to Isaiah, who was signaling to a sleek black car pulling up to the curb. It was a Rolls-Royce Phantom, its polished surface reflecting the city lights. The driver stepped out and opened the rear door, waiting for us. As I began to walk toward the car, the shock that had paralyzed Patricia broke. It shattered into a million jagged pieces of rage. "You ungrateful little witch!" she screamed, her voice losing all its cultured polish and descending into a guttural shriek. "How dare you! After everything I did for you, I gave you life. I raised you. You owe me. You owe me everything." I kept walking, my head high, my eyes fixed on the open door of the Rolls-Royce. "You are a monster!" she yelled, running a few steps after me, but stopping as the valet security stepped in her path. "You will rot in hell for this, Jada. Do you hear me? You will die alone. Nobody will ever love you. You are cold and hard, just like your money." Her words echoed off the stone facade of the hotel, drawing stares from the people passing by. But they did not hurt me anymore. They were just noise. They were the sound of a ghost trying to haunt a house that had already been exorcised. I reached the car, and Isaiah waited for me to slide into the leather seat. He looked back at my mother one last time, his expression one of pure disdain, before he got in beside me. The driver closed the door with a solid, reassuring thud. Instantly, the screaming was silenced. The soundproof glass of the Rolls-Royce cut off the outside world completely. I could see my mother mouthing words, her face twisted in ugly hate, her arms flailing as she screamed at the closed window. But I could not hear her. She was like a silent movie villain shouting into the void. Isaiah reached across the seat and took my hand. He did not say anything. He did not offer platitudes. He just held my hand, his thumb tracing circles on my palm. "Drive," I said to the chauffeur. The car glided forward, smooth and silent, pulling away from the curb. I watched through this tinted glass as the figure of my mother grew smaller and smaller. She stood alone on the sidewalk, a tiny speck of bitterness in a vast, indifferent city. And then we turned a corner, and she was gone. I leaned back against the seat, and for the first time in 29 years, I took a breath that felt entirely my own. It did not taste like guilt. It did not taste like obligation. It tasted like freedom. The silence inside the Rolls-Royce was not empty. It was heavy with the weight of unsaid things, but for the first time in my life, the silence was not lonely. I watched the city lights blur past the tinted windows, streaking like comets in the darkness. The chaos of the Langham Hotel, the screaming of my mother, the sobbing of my sister, all of it felt like a nightmare I was finally waking up from. I leaned my head back against the plush leather seat and let out a long, slow breath. My hand was still resting on the center console, and Isaiah had not let go. His grip was firm, warm, and grounding. I turned to look at him. In the dim light of the passing street lamps, his profile was sharp and unreadable, but when he turned to meet my gaze, the mask of the ruthless corporate raider slipped. I saw the man beneath. I saw the boy who had been thrown away by his family just like I had. I saw the scars of a survivor. "You were incredible back there," he said, his voice low and rumbly, vibrating through the quiet space between us. "I have closed billion-dollar deals and hostile takeovers, but I have never seen anyone dismantle a room with just a few words and a bank statement." I smiled, but it was a tired smile. "I did not want to destroy them, Isaiah. I just wanted them to see me. I wanted them to know that I was not the invisible girl behind the pillar anymore." Isaiah lifted my hand to his lips, pressing a soft kiss to my knuckles. "They see you now, Jada. The whole world sees you. And more importantly, I see you." I felt a warmth spread through my chest that had nothing to do with the heated seats. We were two wolves who had been kicked out of the pack, forced to hunt alone in the winter. We had sharpened our teeth on rejection and built our castles out of ice. But sitting there in the back of that car, I realized I did not have to be cold anymore. The performance was over. The fake dating was done. But as his thumb traced the line of my palm, I knew that what we had started tonight was real. We found a rhythm in the silence, a shared understanding that only two people who have clawed their way from the bottom to the top could share. We were not just partners in crime, we were partners. 12 months is a long time in the world of business, but it is an eternity in the world of karma. Time has a funny way of balancing the scales, and gravity always wins in the end. The fluorescent lights of the Megamart grocery store buzzed with an annoying hum. It was Tuesday night, the discount night, and the lines were long. At register 4, the cashier was scanning items with a mechanical lethargy. Her hair, once dyed a perfect platinum blonde, was now showing dark roots that had grown out 3 inches. Her nails, which used to be long acrylic sculptures, were cut short and chipped. Her name tag hung crookedly on her polyester vest, reading Bianca. "Paper or plastic, Bianca?" asked, her voice raspy from a shift that had started at 6 in the morning. The customer, a woman in a sharp business suit, looked up from her phone. "Plastic. And hurry up, please. I am late for a dinner reservation." Bianca flinched. She recognized the tone. It was the tone she used to use on waiters and valets. She bagged the frozen dinners and the generic brand soda, her hands moving automatically. She looked tired. Lines of stress had etched themselves around her mouth and eyes, making her look 10 years older than her 27 years. The Mercedes was gone. The penthouse was gone. The friends were gone. When the 6-month extension I granted them expired, the Harringtons had failed to liquidate enough assets to cover the interest, let alone the principal. The market had smelled their desperation and lowballed every offer. I did not have to lift a finger. The banks descended like vultures. The estate in Lake Forest was foreclosed. Charles and Eleanor were forced to move into a 2-bedroom rental in a neighborhood they used to make fun of. Liam was working at a used car dealership, trying to pay off his fraud fines to avoid jail time. And Bianca, my princess sister, was left with nothing but the clothes on her back and a mountain of joint debt she had signed for without reading. "Here is your receipt," Bianca mumbled, handing the slip of paper to the woman. The woman glanced at Bianca and paused. "You look familiar. Did not you used to be—" Bianca looked down, her face burning. "No. I just have one of those faces. Have a nice night." She watched the woman walk away, her heart pounding with the fear of recognition. This was her life now, scanning groceries for people she used to socially outrank, praying that nobody would remember the girl who got dumped on a stage in a torn wedding dress. Meanwhile, 500 miles away in a high-rise studio in Manhattan, the atmosphere was very different. The on-air light turned a bright red, and the news anchor flashed a professional smile. Welcome back to Global Business Watch. Our top story tonight is the merger that has everyone on Wall Street talking. Sterling Ventures has officially acquired the remaining assets of the Harrington Group, rebranding to launch a new international conglomerate. Joining us now are the co-CEOs, the power couple of the year, Isaiah Harrington and Jada Vance. The camera panned to us. I sat next to Isaiah, our shoulders touching. I was wearing a white suit, sharp and tailored, a stark contrast to the black dress I had worn in the shadows a year ago. Isaiah looked commanding as always, but his eyes were soft when he looked at me. We were not just appearing on the news, we were the news. The anchor leaned forward. "Jada, if I may ask, you started as a silent investor known only as the ghost broker. Now you are stepping into the light, leading a multi-billion-dollar empire. What changed?" I looked directly into the camera lens. I imagined Bianca watching this in the break room of the grocery store. I imagined my mother watching it on her small television in her rental apartment. I imagined everyone who had ever told me I was not enough. I stopped hiding. I said, my voice steady and clear. I realized that my value was not determined by my family or my social standing. It was determined by my resilience. I spent years building a foundation while others were painting the facade. And when the storm came, the facade collapsed, but the foundation stood. Isaiah took my hand on national television, unapologetic and proud. And we are just getting started, he added. We are building something that is not just about profit, it is about legacy. A legacy based on truth. The interview ended with smiles and handshakes. As the cameras cut to commercial, Isaiah leaned over and whispered in my ear, "You look beautiful, Mrs. CEO." I laughed, a genuine sound of joy that bubbled up from my soul. We walked out of the studio past the producers and the assistants who looked at us with awe. We walked out onto the balcony overlooking the city skyline. The world lay spread out before us, a glittering tapestry of lights and possibilities. I looked down at the street far below where the buses and the cars looked like toys. I thought about the journey. I thought about the pain. I thought about the lonely nights and the tears I had swallowed. I thought about the table behind the pillar. Most people would look back on that day with anger. Most people would wish it never happened. But as I stood there, holding the hand of the man who loved me, not for what I could give him, but for who I was, I realized I was grateful. I looked at the reflection in the glass window. I saw a woman who was whole, a woman who was loved, a woman who had won not by playing their game, but by reinventing the rules. I smiled. Sometimes being pushed into the shadows is the only way to learn how to generate your own light. And sometimes being forced to sit alone behind a pillar at your sister's wedding is the best thing that can ever happen to you. Because it was there in the darkness that I found the exit door to my old life and walked through it into the brilliance of my destiny. This story reminds us that our true value is never defined by those who refuse to see it, even if they share our blood. Jada's journey proves that shrinking ourselves to keep the peace only empowers those who mistreat us. True freedom begins the moment we stop seeking validation from people committed to misunderstanding us and start owning our power. Sometimes the rejection we fear is actually the protection we need, guiding us toward the people who will truly cherish us. If Jada's victory resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more stories of resilience. Have you ever found strength in rejection? Share your experience in the comments below.